Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for coming back. Oh, I'm so glad somebody came back. How did the British Empire rule the world? Well, I have no clue. I'm very ignorant on the subject. What was that? I didn't mean to hit play. That was creepy. I almost like... How did the British Empire rule the world? That's what I came here for.
The British Empire may not have technically ruled the world, but it was, in fact, the largest empire to exist at any point throughout history.
Oh my god, I didn't know that. It's so funny to me because it's like, look at Great Britain up there. Just chilling by itself, you know, it's like an island. And somehow, how are you controlling the world, bro? That is crazy. How are you controlling the world from your little island? Especially back in the day. Like before the internet, before telephones, you know what I'm saying? Like, how were people in Egypt and Australia, you know, paying attention to you all the way out there? It's impressive. That's what I'm really trying to say.
Multiple centuries, the British Empire owes its success and ability to expand so widely. The geographical position of Great Britain served as a major advantage to the growing empire.
Well, here I am talking about how it's like...
Given that the nation was an island,
surprising.
The likelihood of being invaded or conquered was somewhat lower than a country that was surrounded on all sides by foreign powers.
Especially back before planes, you gotta think. Before planes? Yeah, you're not invading us with a ship, dude.
Although Britain,
because ships sink,
was not completely immune
That's
to
actually
incursions,
OP.
it definitely benefited geographically.
That's
both
OP.
in terms of external threats and when it came to any border disputes. Britain had a pretty clear and straightforward border between itself and any other nations.
Yeah, I'll say.
While Scotland and England split the landmass that was bilaterally...
Oh, look at that. Ireland used to be England.
United with the ascension of Scotland's King James VI to the throne of England in 1603, both states would together make up the nation of Great Britain by 1707. Sharing their outward borders with nothing but the North Atlantic Ocean and the North Sea. This open position, with easy access for maritime expeditions, also gave Great Britain an upper hand when it came to reaching other countries and continents. Needing only to cross over foreign land when they wished to reach countries more inward on their continent, the Brits were able to sail to just about any coastal nation without much resistance. Still, oceanic adventures would not have been so effortless for the British Empire without a strong naval fleet.
Yeah,
This is where
clearly.
the size and power of the Royal Navy became a center point of British success. While Great Britain did not always control the world's oceans, the reason they began to skyrocket as an unignorable maritime power by the 18th century is largely due to the fact that they invested more money in ships and guns than other naval forces.
I mean, they basically had pirate ships, okay? You gotta admit, that's pretty badass. Look at that. Just imagine back in the day having the most badass giant pirate ships with huge sails. 20 sails going down it and cannons on it. That's cool.
The government and citizens of the British Empire truly believed that the future of their wealth was to be found through the ocean. Recognizing the importance of overseas trade, as well as a fleet that could also defend their land if ever required, the Brits made sure to adequately fund the Royal Navy.
That makes a lot of sense.
The Empire's focus on trade additionally contributed vastly to its triumphant transcontinental growth. Intent more on gaining wealth and increasing trade than on consolidating power through conquest, the Brits were able to create a more desirable environment for others to become a part of. After the successful colonization attempts in North America and the West Indies during the 60s,
So they kind of like, I don't know, they're almost like how China today exports so much goods and does so much trade. Back in that day, it was Great Britain doing all the trade, so everybody was relying on them, and they were buying a lot of stuff, so they were relying on them for exports and imports, and that makes sense. That's pretty cool.
1600s, the British Empire began to establish a commercial system that
And they were relying on them for their ships, their badass ships.
1600s,
Got it.
the British Empire began to establish a commercial system that allowed for exponential success within Great Britain and its overseas territories. Colonies were granted monopolies for their products in the British market, and therefore were to conduct trade via British ships. In 1651, the Navigation Act would prompt the development of a closed economy between the empire and its colonies,
That'll do
thus
it.
creating a system where all colonial imports were required to come from Great Britain and all colonial exports were to be sent directly to the British market by the way of British ships. During the same century, the British East India Company was established as a means of trade between Great Britain, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and India. Initially focused on the spice trade, the East India Company later incorporated other goods such as silk, cotton, tea, opium, and more. Politics made its way
Opium.
into the company later on, despite the origin being purely based on establishing more trade opportunities. Driven limitlessly by the concept of controlling a global trade market, the British Empire continued to extend its reach across the continents of Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and the Americas.
Dang, look how much land in Canada. I had no idea. 1820, huh? I had no idea Great Britain had that much control over pretty much all of current day Canada.
While the process of colonization varied from territory to territory,
They really spread themselves out.
one thing that remained
Like,
consistent
holy
was
crap.
the form in which these
Those ships, the fact that they have ships that can even go that far.
expeditions began. Unlike other empires who chose to expand through the use of military might and sovereign claims to power, the British facilitated most of their expansion through the establishment of trading posts and systems. Nonetheless, the British Empire was not a completely non-violent authority. On top of the
You want to trade? I might invade you if you don't want to. Do you want to? You will do that anyway, but sure. Hey, at least they gave them the option. You know, that's a lot more respectable than just going in there and pillaging the place like some other people did. So they're like, hey, they're twisting their, you want to trade? You want to trade with our ships? You're just going to use our ships, and you're going to send us your stuff, and you're only allowed to send it through our ships to us. Does that sound good? We'll invade you.
Anglo-Dutch and Anglo-Spanish wars near the start of British expansion, the empire also engaged in conflict with its American colonies during the American Revolutionary War, later followed by the dissension in India, succeeding the decline of the Mughal Empire.
It's so bizarre to me to think India, of all places, such a different culture than Britain today.
And leaving the British
But they controlled
East India Company as a prominent political power in the region. The presence of Britain in India was also notably more forceful than some of their other trade-focused enclaves, demonstrated by the expansion of the East India Company's power through the threat of violence against those who protested. The continued
It'd
tension
be like that back in the day. It'd be like that. I feel like, you know, people think today's bad, like what Russia's doing and stuff. I mean, back in the day, that's like all anybody ever did was invade everybody.
between the British and French were no longer secluded in India either, as the 7 Years' War erupted in 1756, lasting until the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763, leaving Britain as the leading power across India and the world's oceans.
And I mean, it makes sense. Back in the day, stuff wasn't as set in stone as it is today, you know. Now that everybody has militaries, I feel like, built up to the point and alliances all tangled out throughout the world, it's really a big deal to invade another sovereign country. But back in the day, it was kind of all up for grabs, you know, because most likely that country you're invading had already been invaded by someone else. So, and, you know, they took it violently. So it's not like they're innocent and you're just, oh, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there are instances where, like how we took over North America and the Native Americans, yeah, that those people seem pretty innocent and we did them wrong. Anyway,
Britain as the leading power across India and the 1763, leaving Britain as the leading power.
Oh, wait, I need to
erupted in 1756, lasting until the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763, leaving Britain as the leading power across India and the world's oceans.
Oh, wow.
When the American Revolutionary War came in 1775, after the British Empire responded to the no taxation without representation movement of the Americans by sending troops to try and subdue the colonies, France and Spain chose once again to go to war with Britain, now as allies of the newly declared United States. In 1783, at the
Imagine if that's the United States. It looks like a fish. That's all the U.S. was back then. It's so different.
Peace of Paris, the British Empire was forced to acknowledge American independence, in turn relinquishing any control over their former colonies. Devising a new strategy after such a drastic loss of territory, Great Britain now turned its attention toward the continents of Asia, Africa, and Australia, marking what some historians call the beginning of the Second British Empire. Though trade between the United States and Great Britain actually continued after the installation of independence, the empire chose to utilize the uncolonized coasts of Australia, which had been discovered by a Dutch explorer, Willem Janszoon, in 1606, and later claimed for the British Crown by James Cook in 1770 under the name of New South Wales. Still feeding their fresh craving for expansion in South Asia, the British suddenly engaged in a series of conflicts after the Battle of Plassey, which had occurred in 1757.
It's just crazy to think Britain, from that little island, has all these things going on. And what? They're just sending notes back like, hey, we've got a battle going on in India. It's going to take 2 weeks for us to get back to them on what they should do, but you know, should we continue to try to expand in there, or?
By 1774, the British
crazy how history's crazy.
Empire took on a chain of attacks. The Anglo-Mysore Wars were fought until 1799, followed by clashes with the Pindaris. Attacks on places like Sindh and Burma also accelerated the new consolidation efforts of the British East India Company, on top of what was referred to as the Doctrine Lapse, where the Brits forbid the ascension to the throne of any Hindu ruler if they were not the natural heir. Once the current Hindu leader either died or was removed in some way, the British would occupy his state and gain control. These acts by the British Empire, combined with other forms of forced westernization of the Hindus, led to the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 to 1859. Tired of the current heavy-handed British rule, the Indian troops of Meru sparked a rebellion that would spread throughout the nation. Peace was finally...
Yeah, it's super interesting to think about, like, how did India gain its independence from Britain? Obviously, I've heard a million times. I know all about, sort of. Honestly, I don't know nearly enough about it, but you know how America gained its independence. But what about, like, India?
Sparked a rebellion that would spread throughout the nation. Peace was finally declared in July of 1859, and the British East India Company was scrapped. Although the empire maintained a level of control under the crown until 1947.
1947. That's like my dad might have been alive.
During this span of time, Great Britain set about making its presence better
My dad's kind of old.
known in Africa as well.
Maybe he wouldn't have been alive. Not quite. My grandpa was, though.
Although the Royal African Company had been established back in the 17th century, finding ample profit in the slave trade until its abolition in 1807. It was not until the 19th century
that.
the Brits realized the potential benefit of forming a trade route across Africa. With its eyes set on establishing outposts spanning from Egypt down to the southern half of the continent, the British Empire found itself in a race against the other growing European powers, such as Italy and Germany, which eventually led to the Berlin Conference. The conference, which occurred in 1884, was intended to create some harmony between the competing colonizers. Great Britain was ultimately awarded most of northeastern Africa and all of southern Africa, meaning that at its peak in the continent, the British Empire ruled over approximately 30% of the African population.
Who knew?
Globally,
I need to know what happened. What? They controlled so much of Africa, and what happened?
at the height of Britain's domination, it controlled roughly 22 to 25% of the world's land surface, and by 1938 governed around 20% of the world's population. This remarkable
1938
of the world's land surface, and by 1938
that was like yesterday. Britain controlled this much land and people when my grandpa was alive. That's what you're telling me. My mind's blown. I don't understand.
governed around 20% of the world's population.
And they look at Canada. All of Canada.
This remarkable prosperity was accomplished through a geographical advantage, supreme naval might, and the strategic focus on trade and wealth over bullish sovereign power for the sake of an emperor.
That's so fascinating. The only explanation, honestly, that I can think
Over
of
bullish sovereign power
for
the
how
sake of
all
an
this
emperor.
broke up is, and I know like Australia still has strong ties to Great Britain and stuff, but I can only see this all breaking up if Great Britain wanted it to. Like, were they just like, did they separate themselves? Because how else in less than 100 years did Great Britain go from controlling a quarter of the entire world to just being like, all right, we'll just stick mostly over here. We've still got our hands, and we're still a giant player in like the world affairs and what's going on and everything. But to think they controlled all of Canada, half of freaking Africa, all of India, Australia. I need to know more. Hey, thank you for watching. This is super interesting to me. If you enjoy watching my ignorant ass American, me, I don't know what I'm saying. If you enjoy watching me learn stuff as an American about the UK and Europe and Britain, subscribe, because that's what this channel is all about. And I'll see you in the next one, which will be tomorrow. Hey, I'll be there. Will you be there? I hope so. Goodbye. Thank you for watching. Bye.